Welcome once again. Today we have an amazing show. We're doing our English series speaking guest. We have Rob Helms, and he's part of the Real Estate Guys show. Is one of the guys that has more experience in terms of the real estate investing, educational. He has different events. So
Real
it's gonna be a
Estate
great
Guys show.
conversation.
One
So
of
I
the guys
want
that has more
that you guys
experience
stay
in
with
terms of
us
real estate
and just
investing,
learn about him. The
educational.
same
He
thing
has
we're gonna learn
different
about
events.
what he
So
has to
Real
it's gonna be
Estate
a great
Guys show.
conversation.
One
So
of
I
the guys
want
that has more
that you guys
experience
stay
in
with
terms of
us
real estate
and just
investing.
En Hablemos de Real Estate con Carlos Amaya creemos que la familia es la base de la sociedad. Por eso, nuestra misión es proveer información y herramientas a la comunidad latina de cómo lograr la libertad financiera a través de bienes raíces. Okay, so with the okay, Robert, finally.
Hello.
So glad to have you here. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Definitely, it's an honor for us to have you. Like I said in the intro, although we have some technical issues, I was concerned here. In terms of like you are one of the guys that has more knowledge in terms of the industry. I have the pleasure to be in events that you were one of the panel speakers, and I was always fascinated the amount of knowledge that you have. So thank you for being here, and it's so glad to have you with us.
Well, it's great to be here. I appreciate your invitation, and it's great to see everybody.
Definitely. So let's start from the beginning. So you've been in real estate for a long time, and then sometimes we take it for granted that you're already one of the real estate guys. So, but let's go back to the beginnings. How did you get into real estate? How did you get into the industry, and how were you able to stay in it for a long time? That you done it?
Well, Brian Tracy says if you look back to what a kid is interested in from the time they're 7 until 14, it'll give you some insight into perhaps what they would enjoy doing later in life. My favorite thing, starting at about age 9, was playing the game of Monopoly. My parents taught me that game, and the first time we played, they gave me the 4 railroads for free, and I won by a lot, and I got the bug. My dad was a real estate broker and investor, an investor first, and became a broker, and he was in the industry a long, long time, and I kind of gravitated towards it. So he was my mentor in every way possible. But there's a nuance about that. When you get started in real estate, you can, if, as a salesperson, make your living by selling all your friends and family houses. Except my dad had already sold all my friends and family houses. So we had to kind of start from scratch in that regard. But it was a great 18-year partnership that we spent together in the Bay Area of California, selling real estate, mostly residential income property, but certainly some home listings and things like that. Enjoyed a great run, and then transitioned a little bit into passive investing and ultimately syndication, and started my development company in 2002. And so that was the real estate path. In the late 90s, came up with this concept of a talk show on real estate. I had been in college radio, and we had in those days mostly music programming, but there was a public affairs segment on Sunday mornings where we did community-oriented shows, and I did a pitch to a pilot program, if you will, to have a real estate investing show. A few years later, I met the gentleman that would be my co-host to start with. His name was Charlie, and we put together this idea of just doing a show for an hour a week on the weekends in the Bay Area, and that has grown today. This is our 28th year of broadcast on the radio, and a whole bunch of years in the podcast, and our shows heard now in 194 countries.
It's unbelievable. So 28 years, and you're still doing it on a weekly basis back in your area.
Yep, every week. You know, when we started, we listed all the things there were to talk about in real estate, and we figured about 100 shows, right? 2 years, and we'd be done, and that was 28 years ago. So real estate's always changing. The market's changing. And on our show, we also talk about broader picture economics, because if you're a real estate investor, well, that means you're an investor, and you need to know the compared to what, not only what's happening in real estate, but what's happening in the rest of the markets. So we think to be a well-rounded real estate investor, it's good that you have at least a cursory understanding of broader picture economics. So we talk about that quite a bit on the show as well.
That's fascinating because a lot of people want to get into real estate. Obviously, it's a very exotic industry, and unfortunately, they forget to look at the economics for. So you might have the right deal at the wrong time on the wrong place, and then you ended up getting into trouble. So in terms of that, how do you see the economics in the real estate? You've been in the market for 28 years. You've been through different cycles. I listened recently to the podcast that you did with Kay McEnroy last year, and he was talking about that, the 2008, the 2000, the dot-com. So since your point of view, how do you, where we are right now, and how do you see it evolving moving forward?
So the big thing that everyone's talking about is how high the interest rates are. And it's true that interest rates have gone up considerably, and they've gone up pretty quickly. And I think that's really the issue more than anything else. I was at a presentation for a group over the weekend, and I showed a chart with the interest rates on housing between 1977 and 2001. So about a 25-year period almost. And the average interest rate was in the nines. During that time, we saw interest rates in the 10s, the 11s, the 12s, the 16s, and also in the 8s and the 7s. And I think at least one year, the average was under 7. But looking back at those 25 years when a lot of properties sold, when a lot of real estate changed hands, people were dealing with interest rates at 9, 10, 11%. My first house, the interest rate was 10 and a quarter.
Hmm.
And today we look at those kind of rates and go, that's so high. Speaking of Ken McElroy, Kenny has been in real estate about the same amount of time as I have. And he pointed out to me a few months back that during our tenure in real estate, the average interest rate that we've paid is higher than the current interest rate. So I know if you've only been investing for 3 or 5 or 10 years, you think that rates are high. But I'm here to say that rates are not especially high when we look at the big picture.
Yeah, totally. I love that you mentioned that. I do a couple of presentations for our community, and I did a graphic. I was showing a graphic like from the 50s and 60s, and I was telling people, like, when I moved to this country in 1999, I was talking with the guy that was my landlord at that time, an older gentleman, and he was telling me when he bought the property in the 80s, he bought it like 18%, and now obviously in the 2000s it went down to like the fours and the fives, and then recently went to the threes. So yeah, so that's huge because like, if we realize a lot of, like, there's a lot of new investors and like motivated investors that you just want to get into the market, and they got spoiled. We got spoiled with the low rates. But sometimes it's hard in adjustment for both the buyers and the sellers. And I think one of the issues that I see, I don't know if you see the same, is from the seller standpoint. I mean, they still haven't realized where we are, both in residential and commercial. So that's why I think that the law on inventory and obviously the buyer's ability to acquire the mortgage. I mean, they're able to qualify for a mortgage and be able to pay it, is one of the issues that we're still going through, like an education purpose. That's why I like your program, because it's a lot of, I mean, the both parts need education, but I think the sellers, I still wrestle with the idea. They still want to get the top dollar, and they don't realize that the economic cycle that we are.
Well, I think you're right about that. And this is a great example of broader picture economics. So in the stock market, there's a bid and an ask, right? So whoever's selling a share of Apple today is asking a price, and then you've got buyers that are bidding a price. And that's a really, really narrow gauge. And those trades happen every millisecond. Well, right now in real estate, the gap between the bid and the ask is about as wide as it's been, meaning that buyers looking at the market and everything they have to contend with, tenant landlord law, net in migration, interest rates, amortization periods, everything they have to look at. Then they take a look at the trailing 12, the rental income, the expenses, and they make an offer based on what would make sense in today's economics. But the
Correct.
seller doesn't look at it that way. The seller still believes their property is worth what it was a year ago. And rents are still pretty strong in most markets, but prices are down depending on the market you're in. This conference I was at was a multifamily conference, and several of the speakers made mention of multifamily prices being down between 18 and 25% in the last 2 years. Well, that's a problem if you bought an apartment building 2 years ago, especially if you financed it incorrectly and didn't do the underwriting the way you should have. It becomes a real challenge. But when you see that discrepancy between what sellers think the property is worth and what buyers are willing to pay, that spread between the bid and the ask, that tells you a lot about the real estate market. And I think we're seeing that in the results, right? The number of listings in the market right now is near an all-time low. It's certainly a lot less than the average, maybe a third of the average, somewhere around 500,000 properties on the market in the United States. It's not very many when we're used to 1.5 million. And then you have the fact that people are having a harder time financing these properties, not because they can't qualify, but because a payment that 2 years ago would have been $1,200 today is $2,750. So the house becomes less affordable. And the median income is in an area, and then what the median home price is, and then what would it take to qualify for the median home loan. And that tells me a great deal about affordability. In many markets, it's not very affordable. Now, that's not all bad. The reason it's not all bad is if more and more single family home occupants aren't able to buy, then they have to rent, and they have to rent from guys like us. So it's not all bad, but it is definitely a change. And I think that what happens in most markets like this, and I've been through a couple of them, is eventually the bid and the ask reconcile. Those people come together and figure out the seller that is motivated to sell brings their price down. The buyer that is motivated to buy might sharpen their pencil a little bit. But when you have disparity, and we call price discovery, which is true in any kind of price setting, then it is a challenging time to do deals. It's frustrating for brokers and agents. It's hard for buyers. It's hard for sellers. Nobody's enjoying it when we have that kind of disparity.
Totally. For a long time, you always were under the perception that the multifamily properties were like recession proof, and then was like the asset class that a lot of us want to get to. And I had a conversation recently with a well-known syndicator that was telling me, Carlos, what happened with the Fed and with the property insurance premium going like double, triple in different areas is something that nobody would have foresee years ago. I mean, just like 2 years ago, whoever said that the news is gonna happen, might lie to you. So because it's not only like new operators, even people that have been doing it for a long time got caught, like you said, and those bridge loans and those like. But even with the performing assets, they're not able to refinance because they still have the cash flow issues. In terms of syndication, always when you have that period is painful, like you mentioned before, the opportunities comes. How do you see the opportunities moving forward in terms of that asset class that is being hurt for the last 12 to 18 months?
So the only thing constant is change, the fact that things are going to change. And we saw that certainly with the pandemic and the lockdown and the interruption of supply chain. So I don't talk about it much on the radio show, but I have a development company, and we, like many development companies, were faced with not only prices increasing, that's true. Things like lumber increased 3x, but even more important, supply chain. So my friend, Dr. Chris Martinson says it this way. Imagine you have a company that makes a product, a widget, and your widget has 400 components, 400 different parts that go together, and your team assembles this to create a widget that sells into the world. If you have 399 of those 400 pieces available to you, but one not, how many widgets can you make? And the answer is 0. You need all 400 pieces. So supply chain, the fact that I couldn't get certain things really exacerbated that problem. So where we are now is we've seen the supply chain start to lengthen, start to lessen, I would say. It still takes a long time to get some things, but we're freeing it up a little bit. Pricing has gotten better in many regards, but not everything. And so I think the big issue when it comes to multifamily specifically is the nature of the loans. So no investor left behind. If you buy a single family house or a fourplex, you can get into that with 20% down. Typically, you're going to qualify as the buyer and they're going to appraise the property. Whereas as soon as I get into the apartment world, now the property has to qualify based on debt coverage surface ratio. And then I'm going to, also they're going to make sure that I have some experience and so forth. But on those 1 to 4 unit loans in the residential space, it's really easy to refinance that. So say you thought interest rates were high today, but you found a great deal on a 2-unit building, a duplex. So you bought the building today because even though the rates are high and insurance is a little more, another topic we could talk about, it still pencils. It still looks like a decent investment. Well, fast forward 5 years. If the interest rates are down, you refinance. If the interest rates are up, you'll be glad you have the loan that you do, right? Now, the nuance in commercial property for apartments, for office, for retail, is that those kinds of loans aren't easily interchangeable. When I commit to a lender on a commercial property, they commit to me, and the loan might be for 5 or 10 years. But to prepay and get out of that loan, sell the building, whatever the case may be, that can often come with very, very high penalties. So what happened is a few years ago, it made sense for people that were buying apartment buildings to consider short-term financing, otherwise known as a bridge loan. And a bridge loan is meant to bridge you from one point to another that's fairly short. And an example might be you find a property, it's 187 units. The landlord's been kind of lazy and they haven't done much to the property, and rents have atrophied and occupancy is atrophied, but the guy bought it 25 years ago, so he's not that concerned. His basis is low. Well, you come in and you take that property over and you have to have some CapEx, capital expenditures, to fix up the units and get better yield and get the income up. Well, if you know you're going to do that, you might use a bridge loan, a short-term financing vehicle, so that you aren't beholden to the lender or the rate in the current property condition. Most lenders don't want that type of property as collateral, but some of these bridge lenders would take that property. And then your plan was, as soon as we get the rents up and fix the units up and make the complex nicer, we'll be able to refinance and do a more permanent loan, maybe a 10 or 15-year loan. And that's your plan. But a funny thing happened on the way to executing your plan, and that is interest rates shot up. And those bridge loans are normally variable rate loans. They're adjustable, so the rate changes. In other cases, people looked ahead and saw that rates are headed up, so they bought something called a rate cap. And a rate cap is just like an insurance vehicle. It says, hey, we're going to pay a little money up front to ensure that if the rate goes too high, the rate cap kicks in and covers the difference. And rate caps don't last very long either, maybe 2 or 3 years. Well, today, folks that bought rate caps 3 years ago for maybe $60,000 are faced with renewing the rate cap today at maybe $800,000 or $1 million, $800,000 or $1 million. So that's a big difference in a short period of time. So that's what got us into that situation, if you will, is the fast run up in prices and the vehicles used to finance. But I think now, to your question, what happens? Where's the opportunity? Well, there's a ton of opportunity. The market in multifamily is not distressed, but several properties in the multifamily world are. Meaning owners paid too much a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Maybe they raised money through a syndication. Today, the asset is worth less than they paid for it. In some cases, less than the loan amount. That's very, very difficult. Difficult for the syndicator, difficult for the investors, difficult for the bank, very, very difficult for almost everyone involved. In many cases, the tenants don't notice. They're still paying the rent. The property's still there, but the economics aren't working. So I think we're going to see some of those properties come to market. We also have the fact that more than $1 trillion of real estate loans have to be refinanced in the coming years. So in the next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, we're going to see these loans coming due that have to be refinanced. You might have bought an apartment building 4 years ago at interest rate of 2.8, and you have to refinance that in 2024. Well, you're not getting 2.8. right? You might be paying 5.5 or 6 or 7% interest. And that makes a big difference to the operation numbers. So I think we will see, like we do in every cycle change, we will see inventory come to market that has some bit of distress. That's an opportunity. And then secondly, and this is a big picture topic, we are underbuilt in the United States. Many, many markets. Our podcast is heard in over 190 countries. And in many of those places, the housing stock is underbuilt. There's not enough places for people to live. That's very true in the US. How does that manifest? Higher rent, higher asking price for real estate. So because we have that situation, there is a need for housing. And yet we are behind in building housing. But I think in terms of opportunity in the right market at the right rent price, you can engineer what a property would need to look like to meet that need and get that property built today.
No, it's amazing because you mentioned different things, and you mentioned also about the tsunami with the rates. Because I mean, even with the rate cap, we have properties that we have, and it's superseded, and we're going through some of that, some of our projects, and then also the insurance, the premium, which will went crazy in different states. So for a lot of people, there was the perfect storm, but you pictured it really well. I mean, there was a long usage for the right purpose at the right time, at the wrong time, unfortunately. And you mentioned that the opportunity come and all, and it's property that even the property performing. I mean, you see property that are the like 95% occupancy, and they still have a cash flow issues because of the expense. And so I start seeing that in different markets that come into they're being forced to sell, which is a great asset because they're stabilized, but because of the debt that they have. In terms of markets, obviously, it's, I mean, real estate is local. You mentioned in terms of like insurance of like a new constructions. I was reading an article recently. I'm not gonna quote the source, but said that different markets, and I see that overbuilding, and eventually going to have an issue because they're building so many properties that might not that might surpass the demand. But it's not that's not nationwide. It's just different sectors. But in terms of, and it's in different areas. In terms of multifamily, which market do you see that will continue to be that's strong right now, or going to be like good opportunities to get in the next couple of years?
Yeah, the article you referenced makes a good point, and that is it's not equal across the board. All real estate is local. So why one market can have a very different market response than another market, we as real estate investors can go where our money is loved and appreciated. For many years, I've said, live where you want to live, but invest where the numbers make sense. So where's that today? Well, I'll give you two little shortcuts that have helped me immeasurably over my real estate career when deciding markets to look at. Before I give you those, I'll just say this. I believe you can only know about a half a dozen real estate markets well enough to play. You can have a cursory understanding, but in terms of really knowing the market, the players, the geography, the local economy, even a full-time investor has a hard time paying true attention to more than about a half a dozen markets. So one of the keys is just to narrow your vision. So the other two tools that I have to do with narrowing your vision. So the first is that every day in the United States and every other country, people are moving into cities and people are moving out of cities. In my city, people move every day out, people move in. In your city, people move out, people move in. But in some places, there are more people moving in than moving out. We call that net in-migration. So when we net out the number that came in less the number that came out, if that number is still positive, it means population is improving. So I focus on markets that have positive net in-migration. Saves me a world of hurt. Markets that people are leaving, those are challenging markets to provide housing in. But when there's more people coming, hello. The second thing is the 50 United States are very, very different when it comes to how they treat tenants and landlords. So I look at the tenant-landlord law, and I choose only to invest in places that are landlord friendly. And about half the markets in America are landlord friendly. They would side with the landlord, the person who put the capital at risk and qualified for the mortgage, more so than they would the tenant who tried to skip out on the rent. But the other half of the markets are the other way. They are much more advocates for tenants' rights and see the landlords as the evil slumlords. So it's really, really simple to just limit your investing to states that have a population going up and are landlord friendly. So if you look at those, now what become the good markets? That's going to eliminate a whole bunch of stuff that won't waste my time, which is what I love
Sure.
about it. But it's going to leave me a good handful of markets to consider. So once I have that handful of markets to consider, now I start paying attention to new housing starts. Who's already in the market and who's already applied for their permits to construct. Not only that, I can look at what land is being purchased by at least the publicly traded home building companies and apartment companies to see who's already in position. Because here's the deal. If you and I discovered a market was drastically underbuilt, there's a really good chance that 3 dozen other guys have discovered that. And we might all start our little 200 unit apartment project thinking we were ahead of the curve. But what we don't have is visibility into the other 3 dozen people that are doing the same exact thing. So now fast forward 4 years, we've built too many units. So this
Yep.
is why it's not just about the market. Once you're in a market, you have to dig beneath the surface to figure out who's already there and what are their plans.
Definitely, and all of that comes with obviously knowledge and experience, because unfortunately we have a lot of like, and I'm going to mention about residential a little bit later, but to stick with commercial, a lot of like new investors want to get into the market and they go through that. So without getting compromised, mention a couple of states. Which are the state that you will go to? I mean, and I'm not saying that we're gonna quote you it. If people go there, this is just for informational purpose. But which states do you think that will be like appealing right now to go to?
Well, my 2 favorite states are Texas and Florida. Neither one has state income tax, and both of those have net immigration, and they favor landlords. Now, having
Okay.
said that, both of those markets are pretty heated up. So I think there's opportunity in a couple of other markets that haven't yet shown their colors. But big picture, those are the states I like for those reasons. And I think that, especially this year, an election cycle, there's so many things to think about that may nuance some of those decisions. So I don't get caught up in politics. I'm not red. I'm not blue. I just pay attention to policy because I don't care about politics, but I care a lot about policy because policy translates to how are my investment dollars going to do in any given marketplace. So those are the 2 I'd put at the top of my list.
Sure, and I recall Cameron McElroy in your interview. He said that one of the things that we're looking for in terms of the policy, he mentioned the same things of the politics that he doesn't get involved, but a lot of like states or places that they're getting momentum with the rent control that will kill all of our investors. I mean, we will kill a deal. I mean, if you are able to stabilize the property and just get them on the market rate, so that's and same. I'm same here. I'm not crazy about politics, but you have to keep an eye. Otherwise, you might get it in the wrong place. The wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, rent control's a great example of a policy. Rent control isn't political necessarily. It's just a policy. Someone says, hey, in order to make it more affordable for people, we're going to ask private individual landlords to keep their rent low. This is one of my dad's big hot buttons. He's like, I'm all in if everyone's going to help out equally. I'm all
Right.
in. But when you narrow down the help to just the landlords, I had to earn the capital. I had to be in a position to qualify. I had to do my research. I had to pay my fees to get in and own the property. Why should I, as the landlord, subsidize the rent? Instead, forward thinking places give incentive to builders. So, this is another thing Kenny's been talking about, which will jar your brain. And that is that we need housing. The United States needs more housing. Now, depending on who you listen to, Lawrence Yun from the National Association of Realtors thinks we might need 6 or 7 million houses, whereas my friend Danielle DiMartino Booth thinks that's probably like 1.5 million. She doesn't think it's as many as he thinks, and everyone else is somewhere in the middle. But everyone agrees we need more houses. Okay, so again, not being political, looking at policy. How do red states approach the problem? Red states say we need to give incentives to builders and developers to come here, bring their capital and expertise, and create housing. So they do that in a variety of methods. What do blue states do? And obviously, we're generalizing. Blue states do things like cut access to programs, put in more regulations, require other things from developers until developers go, I don't think I want to go there and play. I think I'll go to one of these red states. Again, not political. It's just the policies that have come out of some of these places tell you what they appreciate. And as a developer, there are states I absolutely positively will never bring my energy and enterprise and capital to. They haven't earned the right to my business, but other places have. And so if you're looking to invest, whether it's a single family house or a beautiful, brand new retail complex, you want to go where your money is loved and appreciated. And it's easy to figure this stuff out. Now, it takes time, it takes study. You're not going to have someone knock on your door and give you a package with all the answers in it. You're going to have to think through this stuff, which is why if you're watching a program like this, congratulations. This is how you get your brain sharp. But there's more to think of than just the obvious. Markets are critical, absolutely. But what's happening within those markets in terms of their policy and how that bleeds over to real estate, that makes a huge difference.
Totally. Switching to residential market, and you were through the 2008-2009 crash, and that was mainly done because of the subprime lending. How do you see now the new wave of creative finance? There is a lot of people like raving fans just to try to promote it, and in my opinion, it's a lot of like new investors that overpay for properties because they're doing this creative finance, and I kind of see something repeating what happened in 2008, 2009. They might get caught. So how do you see the new wave in terms of like creative finance and all those different strategies that getting a lot of momentum? And it sounds so appealing to people because obviously the point of interest is a lot easier than just save the 25%, invest, look at the deals. That now with all of that, it opened the pool of buyers to be able to afford a more expensive property with those conditions.
That's a great question, Carlos. There's conventional financing and then there's creative financing, and there always has been. And depending on what's happening in the market, if there's a lot of good availability of conventional financing, then that's the way we go. But when there's not, and now could be, you could argue is one of those times, then we start to get creative. Now, creativity does not necessarily mean higher risk. Creativity does not mean that you have the wrong exposure, but you do have to be aware. And so today, the big challenge that people have is what we call the capital stack. That's all the money required, which is in a single family house, pretty simple, a down payment and a mortgage payment. Well, the oldest creative financing strategy in the book is seller financing. A seller who's paid their house off, and nearly half of the homes in the United States are owned free and clear. They don't have a loan. So one of those sellers paid off their mortgage years ago, raised their kids in the house. The kids have been gone for years. It's time for them to sell the house. It's quite possible that they don't need a big pile of cash. Instead, you could offer to give them the 20% down, and then they would become your bank. They would carry a note. You would make payments to them at 6 or 7 or 8%, which would be a nice little income stream secured by the very property that they know super well. So it's one of my favorite ways to finance. I've done it a ton over the years, and I learned it from my dad. He would sit with a couple and would be talking about listing the sale. He would always say, now, once we get you a great price for your property, what are you going to do with the money? And they'd say, oh, well, we're going to buy another house. We're going to, our family's getting bigger. We're going to build in a nicer neighborhood, or we're going to move to another town nearby. Okay, great. But when they would say, well, we're going to put it in the bank and collect interest, or we're going to buy CDs, he would say, well, I have something for you to consider. How much would you make in the bank? And say the answer was 2%. It wouldn't be that much today, but it might be more back in the day. And they'd say, well, we'd probably make 2% on our money. He would say, well, if I could show you a way that you could make 6% instead of 2%, would you be interested? And if they say no, we like our 2%, into the conversation. But if they go, yeah, we'd be interested, he goes, well, you could be the bank. What do you mean? Well, I mean, rather than you take all the money from the house and put it into the bank and get 2%, how about you just take 20% down, and the other 80% is a loan to your buyer at 6%, because they'll pay 6%. and it's likely tax deductible. They should check with their accountant and find out, right? So that's like the easiest 101 way to have creative financing. Now, fast forward to 2024, and there's all kinds of creative financing out there. So I would just say that if you will expand your mind, you can see lots of unique ways to finance. You just have to ask yourself the same two questions any lender has. If a lender's going to make you a loan, they're interested in just two things. How are you going to pay them back? And what happens if you don't? And the answer is usually, well, because of your income and your credit and your history, or your tenant's income and the occupancy of the building and the rent roll, that's how you're going to pay us back. That would be our first choice. If you're not able to make the payment for any reason, well, we're going to be in a first position lien, whether it's a trustee or mortgage state, and we're going to be able to take the property from you if you can't make the payment. And we don't want to do that, but that protects our investment. So you want to approach the same way to any financing scenario. How are you going to make the payment, whatever the payment might be, and what happens if you don't? So I don't think you should shy away from creative financing, but you certainly want to understand it before you sign on the line.
Totally. And that leads to my next question in terms of like the understanding. That's that example that you put with your father talking with the seller, the homeowner that raise their families that might not have a lot of experience in terms of like the financial system, the way the real estate works. So it requires an explanation, because a lot of people don't even realize it can be their own bank, and they think that's even against the law. I remember when people say, that's not legal. Say, yeah, of course it's legal. I mean, everything's got to go with the attorney, and all the amortization schedule and everything is going to be the same thing. The only difference is, instead of me sending the check to the Bank of America, I'm going to send it to Mr. whatever the name was. So education is important, and I'm preaching to the choir because you've been doing this for like 28 years. I know how hard it is to prepare a show. I used to do radio promoting a law firm in New York for like 10 years. So a week passed so fast, and then you have another show. You have another show. So how have you guys done to be able to maintain the consistency? They've been doing it for a long time, and be able to evolve with the time. I mean, because like you said, real estate, even though seller finance is one of the oldest like creative finance that we have, but we have different strategies, different markets, different players, different so many different things. So is it evolving? The foundation, the fundamentals, the foundation real estate is still the same, but it is different things that is going, and it's going to continue evolving in the next 5-10 years. We're gonna see things like, for example, Airbnb wasn't a thing in, like, I don't know how many years ago, and now I would never imagine have someone living in my house or rent someone's house just for a weekend or a room. And that's something people like is making a living, and people are making great money that way. So in terms of the educational part, how did you guys stick to be able to be so consistent, and why? Because I know it requires a lot of effort, and sometimes it's a challenge, because people don't want to be educated, and people want to get the shortcut. Just how it is, and then give it to me fast, especially right now with the way the information flies, and the consumption rate that we have. So how did you have done to be able to so consistent, and why?
Such a good question. A lot of people think that if you can't say it in 15 seconds, people will scroll to the next thing. And there are people like that, but those aren't your target audience, right? Your target audience is people that will listen through a show of this length, get the nuggets, and want more. That's not everybody. And one of the things I learned really early about podcasting is radio we call broadcasting, and the big networks broadcast to millions of people. That's not what we do when we talk about real estate on a podcast. We are narrowcasting. We're talking to just a very small group of people, but within that group are the people that are the most interested. And so for us, we have some things that we do on our show that are a little different, because we are truly a radio show that is broadcast first, and then we're a podcast. There's podcasters out there that do 2 or 3 minute podcasts and 4 and 5 hour podcasts. You can kind of pick your side of the spectrum. We're typically around an hour, because we have to fit in a 55-minute clock hour, network news, and then 55 minutes of our show, including all the ads and things. So it's just a constraint that we have. But what we've done is try to base most of our content in the real world. I'd rather have someone on the show that no one ever heard of who is doing something remarkable for real in a marketplace than someone who's a famous person who used to do a lot of work or whatever the case may be. Now, no offense, we have a lot of those people on our program. People are amazed at the people we have on our show and the relationships that we have. But it's because of this thirst for knowledge. We really want to understand first. And there's so much to know. And I tell people this: I can teach you the things you want to learn, or I can teach you the things I know you need to be successful. Which would you prefer? And people think they want the shortcut. People want to be told what to do. You shouldn't tell people what to do, but they want to be told what to do. They'll sit with a real estate agent or an insurance salesperson who will say, here are all the options. And they'll say to the salesperson, well, what do you think I should do? Well, how should the salesperson know what you should do? If they're a good salesperson, they're asking you a bunch of open-ended questions to find out about you, and they might be able to guide you. But most salespeople aren't that skilled. It's really up to you to figure it out, what you do. And so my mentor, Jim Rohn, used to say this: formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Everything that you choose to learn that the other guy didn't bother to, that's where all the advantage comes from. Not just having a degree or graduating from high school or going to college. Those things are all interesting. It's what can I do with what I learn? We have a big heart for young adults. As you know, we have a lot of young folks that come out to our events. We love that. We have special pricing for anyone who's 18 to 25 because it's hard when you're starting out to pay for, all kinds of things. And education is a really interesting commodity, right? Because you can get a lot of education for free, but how good is it? And many of the folks that have free education have additional programs to get deeper with folks that want to know more. That's not a bad thing. You can pick and choose. You get to decide with your time, and then you get to decide with your credit card what are the things you want to learn, what's going to be important. I would say that, one of my mentors is, I think, maybe the very best teacher I've ever had. And he wrote a little book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My friend Robert Kiyosaki, we've known each other for more than 20 years. He's an extraordinary teacher because he kind of gets up in your face and he makes you think. He doesn't tell you what to do. He forces you to think through different situations. And at first, it's really irritating and annoying. But eventually, you come to recognize, I have to come to the conclusion myself. And the other thing is he tries to make everything simple. Robert teaches it at an 8th grade level. And there's a lot of educators out there that try to make it just too complex. Here's the deal. If you're going to be an investor in real estate, you don't need to know every single thing about construction, about insurance, about the equity markets. You don't need to know every single thing about public utilities and city council and permits and entitlements. But you do need a team that knows that stuff. And if you think of yourself as the executive producer or the orchestra conductor, you're leading the band. You got to have the band, but you're the person leading that team. And you can accomplish so much in real estate through leverage, not just financial leverage, that's important, but leveraging other people's skills and talents. I'm no attorney, but I know enough about real estate law to know which of my friends that are attorneys to call when I need some specific work done. And they can answer a question so much faster than I could possibly research it because that's their area of expertise. Same when it comes to lending. Nobody's seen more real estate deals than your real estate lender. They look at all kinds of stuff and they have a perspective that is so different. I mean, I've done a lot of deals in my lifetime, but my lenders and bankers have looked at infinitely more deals than that. So they have a much better seat at the table, if you will. So you want to be self-educated. You want to learn enough. It's like you should teach young children to learn enough about their car so they don't get ripped off by a mechanic, not so that they can replace their own parts and their own engine and rotate their own tires. I mean, if they're interested in that, great. But you don't have to be the person doing the work. You have to be the person who's willing to get educated enough so that you can lead the work to be done.
I love that. You mentioned that the younger generation, and I see a thirst for them to learn about real estate. We have a lot of people that reach out. We even have some show that we do with our daughters. They're 19 and 15, and I see the reaction of their parents when they say, my kid was listening to the show, and it's great. And I wanted to share a quote from James Clear. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits, and he said you have to offer people what they want, but give them what they need. And that's what
Bingo.
happens sometimes, and it's great because sometimes if you offer what they need, they don't want it. Okay, but if you offer what they want, which is a short goal right away in their mind, and but you obviously you give it what they need, is how you're able to help and impact their life, which is what we want. In your case, obviously, you've been there for a long time. You mentioned Jim Rohn. um and the self-education is not just in terms of real estate knowledge, also like self-development, the development, and as to become the best possible version, and use some of us have like limited mindset and all those different things. In my case, it was more like Tony Robbins. I know about Jim Rohn, but I think I started my path with Tony, and I still, as a matter of fact, I'm going to his event next month. How do you include that within the real estate, the Jim Rohn? You just say he's your mentor, and then how helpful has been and how do you interact that whatever you got through him, and it's still because his material is everywhere, you can find it, with real estate.
Well, that's such a good question and a good point to ponder. So, anyone that knows the story knows that Tony Robbins went to work for Jim
Yeah,
Rohn
Jim
and
Rohn, yeah.
learned many of his early principles from Jim. And Tony has taught so many of us. So, that's the pebble in the water. Jim Rohn is not as well known as Tony Robbins, but Tony Robbins was a student of Jim Rohn's. And so Jim was able to reach a lot more people by reaching Tony. And
Totally.
this is the part about personal development. Tony Robbins says you don't lack resources, you lack resourcefulness.
Mm.
And if we look at what we have in our lives, it's almost always the easiest thing is to look at the thing we don't have, the thing we're missing, the thing we want. Rarely do we take the time to appreciate the things that we have. So Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy wrote about this in a book called The Gap and the Gain, measuring ourselves against the gain, the progress we've made instead of the gap, what we're still trying to do. Not that we don't have goals, not that we want to be more. But I think to be successful in any endeavor, real estate or anything else, you first have to turn the spotlight at yourself. If you take an airplane, and I'm on those quite a bit, they always tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help other people. So unless you're willing to do the work to become a better person, then how can you send the elevator back down? And so personal development is just the art of getting better at the things that you do. And there's two schools of thought in personal development. One is I'm going to take an assessment of everything that I'm good at and everything that I'm not good at. And I'm going to focus on getting better at the things I'm not good at. If I'm not good at accounting, if I'm not good at sales skills, I'm not good at interpersonal relationships, I'm going to focus on getting better at those things. And that's going to make me a better, more developed person. Now, the other school of thought is to say, I'm going to do the same assessment, figure out what I'm good at, what I'm not. And then I'm going to design my life so I only spend time doing the things that I am good at and enjoy, and the things that I'm not good at, accounting and whatever it might be, I find somebody else for whom that is their passion. They are good at that. They enjoy doing it. And there's always somebody, whatever it is you don't like to do, there is some crazy person that loves that. And so personal development is a journey. It's not a destination. We're always doing what we can to get better. And we do that in real life by taking the lessons that life hands us, both good and bad, and learning from them. And we do that by reading and going to events and getting around other people. My favorite thing in the world is to hang out with super accomplished, super driven, super motivated, super successful people. If they'll have me, that's a great room to be in because they have you thinking higher, being sharper, holding yourself and others accountable. And that's the school of personal development. So it's not real estate, but I found that most successful people in real estate are also very polished when it comes to personal development. They're also very willing to be vulnerable and to get the lesson that life hands you. I don't know anybody that has everything go well 100% of the time. People show up that way on social media, but in the true world, There's always setbacks, problems, challenges. That's what makes us better. Steel against steel. Abraham Lincoln said you have to rub your brain against other brains. That's how your brain gets better, not by sitting in your, easy chair listening to podcasts. That could be an excellent start, but at some point you got to banter back and forth the ideas. I like to listen to people that have different opinions about things. It's like, okay, I'm going to listen to this opinion and I'm going to listen to this completely different opinion, and then I'm going to make my own decision. But if I'm not open enough to listen to both sides, then I become part of an echo chamber, which explains 80% of all the divisiveness, I think, in the world is based on not being willing to hear the other side. Robert Kiyosaki says it this way. He says, there are two sides to a coin. So this is an ounce of gold. There's this side and there's this side. But in reality, there is a third side, and that's the edge. And if we train ourselves to stand on the edge, consider this way and consider the other way, and then make our decision, we'll make better decisions every time.
Tony, you make a great point in terms of like personal development and real estate correlated. In top of my mind, I remember I talked with Brandon Turner. He's a big Tony Robbins follower, and I've seen like I know you had Brad Samrock here in your program, and he's big Tony and Rockcliffe as well. So a lot of real estate investors and syndicators as well are part of the Tony ecosystem. And I love you mentioned the Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy book, because he mentioned that you mentioned about like the second school of thought is to find someone that does it, and they wrote a book about that as well, the who know how. What it says, you find the who's and instead of learn about the how. So yeah, I love those books, and the 10X and the 2X is another one. The truly
well, it brings up a really important point. So Dan Sullivan, with Strategic Coach, has been sharing these ideas. The gap and the gain idea came to him in the late 90s. Yeah. And yet only by partnering with Ben Hardy, Dr. Ben does most of the work on writing the books based on understanding what Dan's there to say. So back to partnerships. If we're really good at just a few things, well, there's going to be things we're not good at. So we should seek out people in our lives that are good at the other things. That way they think differently, they approach it differently, and together we get the job done. So both those books are a great example of that. And then, 10X, what a great way to think. And if you look at the background of Grant Cardone and car sales, there's not a more real on the street business than that, and everything he was able to learn and glean from that industry while putting profits into real estate, become a huge multifamily guy, right? And here's the thing, I try to get value from everybody, right? You don't have to resonate with everybody, and you probably won't. There are some people turned off by certain speakers and authors, and some people totally inspired by certain speakers and authors, and it's all good. You just got to find the person or the people that speak to you and get more of that, and ask if the people you're hanging around are taking you to the places you want to go. Sometimes we get drugged down by the people in our lives, and this is no good. It doesn't mean that you cut them off. It just means that maybe you spend fewer amount of hours with someone who doesn't have you feeling better about yourself when you leave. So there's a lot to it. Obviously, if you are interested in being and doing more, then you'll apply that whatever business you're in. And I think that one of the best investments a real estate investor can make is in their own personal development.
Definitely. I love that. I love the conversation. We can be talking here for hours. But I want to be respectful of your time, obviously. And at the end of the show, usually we ask the same question to all our guests in order to get to know them a little more in the personal side. What are your hobbies when you are not doing the shows, when you are not doing the events, when you are not going to all the different speaking engagement that you do all the time? Because that's how I was able to get to meet you and get to know you through all those events. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do when you have free time?
Love that question. People are a package deal, right? And everybody's different.
All great questions.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I knew it would be. I said yes because of your fabulous family and the fact that you involved them. But I've really enjoyed our conversation. Faith is my most important thing. That's my family. That's who we are. I am assistant troop master, scout master, we call it, for the Boy Scout troop my boys are in. I'm an Eagle Scout. My oldest son is an Eagle Scout, and my youngest son is getting close. So if it all works out according to my plan, then I'll have 2 boys that are Eagle Scouts in my family. A thing I love about scouting is the outdoors. Being outside, being in a studio with lights and microphones and cameras. Okay, that's good for a little while, but you got to get out and see the world. It's a big, beautiful place. And for that reason, I love to travel. One of my favorite quotes is from St. Augustine, who said, "The world is like a book, and those that do not travel see but a page." So it's a big, beautiful place. It's harder to get around these days, but still worth it. And there's just so many awesome places in the world. And then I love music. I go to a lot of shows, a lot of concerts, and love
what kind of music do you like?
Well, I have a really wide taste in music. It's crazy how diverse my musical taste is. But if there's anybody who's top of their game, well known, even if they're new, then I'm usually down for going to check out a show. I will say that if I'm going to go, I want to get good seats. So that's one of my indulgences. Is back in the day when I was a teenager, we had to stand in line to buy tickets, in whatever order you got your ticket was where you sat. And so I would get up really early so I could get early in line so I could get a good seat. Well, it's like that now, except you don't have to get up early. You can just pay more for a ticket. So
yeah, and I love you mentioned that, because that one of the things that I love to do besides doing the podcast, because I did radio for a long time. I'm not as you. I mean, that's not as you did. You done it, but that was great. I love the microphones. I love the do this. I mean, I can do this every day. But in terms of the concerts, and the experience that you have, if you aren't having a good seat and you're comfortable and you I mean, you can even sometimes feel that you're in interaction with the artist, because you're so close and you see, and instead of just far away, you might not see that the facial expressions. So yeah, I'm same here. I love concerts. I mean, a lot of them, sometimes maybe too many. But it's a huge difference in terms of like where you sit it and how comfortable you are, and all those things. So we share that passion.
Well, that's awesome. So I will show you a picture that I took from the front of the stage. There I am with Katy Perry. So
Yeah,
not that I had to mention anybody, but I couldn't have been closer. I was right on the stage. She even sweat on me. If I can't get sweat on by the artist, I'm not close enough.
I'm telling you, that's what it is. And you see the fact, the expression, and sometimes you even forgot that you have like thousands of people behind you watching the show, because you think that there's a one-on-one show. So that's great. We mentioned a couple of books already, but besides the one that already mentioned, which book would you recommend to us? And in a movie, I don't know if you like movies, series. So which one would you recommend? A book and
All
a
right, I got
movie,
2
or
books
series?
for you. Both in my top 10 list. The first is called Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. You can read it in an afternoon. You will believe that he wrote it just for you. It's a butt kicking of a book, but it is a great book. Turning Pro.
I'm gonna put it on my list because I just finished mine. I'll share which one it was, but I wanna do that one. Turning Pro.
That's such
Okay.
a good book. And then Prosper. Prosper is written by Dr. Chris Martenson and Adam Taggart, and it has nothing to do with real estate directly. They talk about the 8 forms of capital. So we think about
Okay.
capital, we think about money, but there's a lot of other forms of capital. I'll give you one: social capital. And they define social capital this way: it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're at work, and you discover you cannot get to pick up your child at school. How long is the list of people that you can call who, one, would drop everything and pick your kid up, and 2, your kid would get in the car with? That defines how much social capital you have. And there's a whole bunch of more great examples. My favorite thing about the book is it gives you some real things that you can do to start living a more resilient life. So Prosper by Chris Martenson and Adam Taggart would be my second choice. I
Wonderful.
am kind of a movie guy. I don't watch very much television. I'm socially illiterate when people ask about TV shows and stuff. I've never seen a single episode of Game of Thrones or Lost or any of the. I've never watched any of that. But I do like movies. I do like a good movie. One of my favorite movies is called Leap of Faith with Steve Martin. And for a variety of reasons, there's just some great lessons in there. But I do like to watch movies that are uplifting. I used to like the blockbuster movies with stuff explodes and there's a lot of guns, but I just discovered that I don't sleep as well when I watch a movie like that. my subconscious brain brings up all kinds of crazy stuff when I'm dreaming. I would just rather watch a poignant movie or a movie that has a great life lesson or a movie that's just fun.
Yeah, that same here with the movies. I like the movie that has a storyline. A lot of like sometimes like biography on the style movie. Have you watched the Society of the Snow? That's the plane the had an accident in the Alps and in Chile in 1972. So if you ever want to watch a nice movie, it's called Society of the Snow, and just came out this last year. And you will
Ah,
love it.
I appreciate the recommendation. I will check that one out, my friend.
I think you will love it. Okay, so the last question. What is your differentiator? How come you're able to be doing this for 28 years, surviving the real estate cycles? Because a lot of people just get into real estate, get to the down cycle, and they just get out of it. They don't survive it. And you've been doing it, and more than surviving, you've been thriving. You've been doing it, and you're like one of the reference for all of us that want that want to do podcasts, they eventually want to do events. So, what is your differentiator? How come you be able to do it? And so many people try, attempted, or not even attempt to do it because they never feel that they have the necessary in order to accomplish everything that you have done and whatever you're going to continue to accomplish moving forward.
There is always competition in anything you do. But if all you do is focus on the competition, you will be mediocre. You'll be an also ran. You'll be one of many. I think the key is to go into the door that nobody's going into, to look at
Yeah.
something differently, to take a different angle, to apply something you've learned in one area of your life to another area of your life, to come up with something unique. They say there's nothing new under the sun, and that's probably true. But what we have every day presented for our benefit are things that people took these abstract ideas, wondered about them in their mind, came up with possibilities, and created the idea of the blockchain, for example. Like it could take you all week to think about that idea. And then once you have an idea, a foundation, then others come along and use their uniqueness to figure it out. I think one of the keys to that is what we call your major definite purpose. And that's the Venn diagram, you will, the place that intersects what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and what you enjoy time doing, right? If you look at those things, then that will give you the intersection of those things will give you a glimpse into what you ought to be spending your life work doing. So I heard it said years ago that it's only work if you'd rather be doing something else. So if that's true, then I don't do any work at all. I love what I do. I love my life. I love the people that are in my life. And I just want to help people get to that point in any way I can. So, and then be yourself. You already have every single thing you need to be who you want to be. It's already inside you. It's a little bit of a puzzle to get it aligned in such a way that it goes out into the world in the way that is going to make the best example for you. But I think you have everything you need. You just have to refine that. And the best way to do that is to get around sharp people that will hold you accountable and lead you to the path that makes sense for you. So I don't think it's magic. I think it is consistency. It's work ethic. Come in earlier, stay later, read the extra thing the person won't, watch the one more video, listen to the one more podcast after everyone else has gone to bed. But at the same time, don't let the things that matter most be at the mercy of the things that matter least. And
Yeah.
too many times people forget their priorities. So if you can just be yourself, be authentic, and follow your heart, that's a really good start.
Amazing. Wonderful. Where can we find you? I mean, obviously, I know where can I find you, but where can people follow you and listen to the shows and everything that you do and the events and every opportunity that you provide to all of us to be able to access to some of the knowledge that you have?
So I think the easiest place to find us is on your favorite podcast distributor, whether it's you Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Spotify or iHeartRadio. We're in all those places. We're the Real Estate Guys. We have a show every week. Or you can go to realestateguysradio.com, realestateguysradio.com. You can learn about the events and things that we do, and then the other places that we go to speak, other people's events, and so on. So we'd love to have you join our listening audience.
Definitely. So don't go away. I would like to say bye to you in a couple of seconds, please, Robert. And to all of you, thank you once again to be here. Definitely for us, it's a pleasure to be doing this series. If you have any questions regarding real estate investing, if you have anyone that want to learn about real estate investing in Spanish or in English, which is in English or in Spanish, which is our main language in our channel, you're welcome to contact us. And God bless you. And just join us on this Saturday. We're going to be back at 1 p.m. Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. God bless you and have an amazing day.